Hello everyone, I'm Julian. Welcome to another episode of All In, where we take deep dives into some of our favorite video games. Today, my topic of choice is a funny subgenre of games that only one developer has really mastered. Games that most gamers in the West would instantly recognize, even though many have never played a single one of them. Games that take action to an absurd level in the way that really only a Japanese game can, and yet they're often based on the lives of very real people. Today I want to talk about the history of Musou games. Now, I bet many of you know the games I'm talking about, even if you've never heard the term before. Musou games are hack and slash titles if the hack and slash were turned up to 11,000. The battlefield is awash in peons that playable characters utterly decimate until they fill up a gauge and unleash a Musou attack that somehow brings down even more destruction. Sure, lots of games involve beating so many enemies, it's kind of absurd, frankly, when you stop and think about it. But because enemies in those games aren't total pushovers and because the encounters are spread out, most of us are too busy coming down from an adrenaline rush to notice that we basically wiped out a small army over the course of a playthrough. Not Musou games. Musou games put the army en masse right in front of you and say, how many can you get in a row? Common foot soldiers seem laughably harmless. It's like someone made a game that tried to answer the eternal question, how many toddlers do you think you could take in a fight? It's a real question, people ask it, okay? How else do you explain this actual and real statue in Norway? Anyway, because of that unique approach to gameplay, they are instantly recognizable. They've been on many platforms and have crossed over with many other titles over the years, but as soon as you see one character juggling 30 identical goons, you know it's a Musou game. Which is why it's fascinating to me that the very first Musou game looked like this. Do not adjust the television set because you're in a store and touching the TV would break a social norm. But yes, that is the original Musou game, a one-on-one weapons-based fighting game a la Soul Calibur, developed by Omega Force and published by Koei in 1997 for the PlayStation. In the States, it was known as Dynasty Warriors, but in Japan, it was released under the title Sengoku Musou, which more or less literally translates to Three Kingdoms Unrivaled. The fighters were historical figures from the Three Kingdoms era of Chinese history, a time in the 3rd century when three factions fought for control of the country for nearly 100 years. Imagine a game today where George Washington could throw his dentures at King George, and you basically got the idea. Also, nobody take that idea, it is mine. While it's technically the first Musou game, it wasn't Koei's first to use this setting. One of the company's early hits was a 1985 turn-based strategy game called Romance of the Three Kingdoms, based on a 700-year-old romanticized Chinese historical novel of the same name. It wasn't until the year 2000 when a Musou game, as we would recognize it, finally hit the scene. Despite the totally new genre, the cast of characters and setting were still from the Three Kingdoms era, so it was sold in the States as Dynasty Warriors 2, presumably for name recognition reasons. In Japan, the word Shin, meaning true, was added to the title, making it the first game in the Shin Sengoku Musou series. To this day, the Western releases in the series are numbered one higher than their Japanese counterparts, which is confusing, to say the least. Once they finally nailed down the formula for their new class of games, Koei went berserk. Along with mainline games, they released expansions like Extreme Legends games, which featured more detailed stories about fan-favorite characters, or the Empires spin-off, where players could alter history and conquer China with the faction of their choosing. 2004 saw the release of the first Samurai Warriors game, set in 1500s Japan when the country was splintered into warring states. The franchises made their inevitable crossover in 2007 with Warriors Orochi. Picture George Washington using his dentures to defeat the army of Julius Caesar, and again, that one's mine, don't take that. Various anime and manga have gotten their own Musou games, including Gundam, One Piece, and Fist of the North Star. Tons of big-name video game properties have gotten the Musou treatment, like Legend of Zelda, Dragon Quest, Fire Emblem, Persona. There's even a game where characters from Samurai Warriors have partner Pokemon to match their personalities. Imagine if George Washington had a Bidoof, and why am I not writing these down? There are so many Musou games, and they're showing no signs of slowing, so even if you haven't tried one out yet, it's a good bet that sooner or later one will come along with just the right mix to tempt you into trying out the genre. I remember exactly what did it for me. Outside of games, I have a lot of interests, one of which is history. No, don't turn off the TV, because again, it's the stores. But hear me out. I find history captivating. The stories and events and characters are so much richer and more nuanced than we're taught in grade school that for me, they're as interesting as any work of fiction. I love seeing the little threads that tie the world together, the pieces of our past that fit together to form our present. When I'm not gaming, you can usually find me building a model airplane and listening to a 6-hour history podcast. Frankly, it's incredible that I'm as tan as I am. I, like many, used to write Musou games off as repetitive and samey, but my old roommate Trey loved these things, and he would come home from his shift at GameStop and just hack away at hordes of baddies for hours. Now, he'll be the first to tell you they're mindless fun. They only really get challenging when you ratchet up the difficulty settings. But I'll never forget one day when I asked him if there was an actual plot to the game, Trey perked up and recounted the twists and turns of the Three Kingdoms era like he was reading them off of my forehead. And not just the Koei version of the story, he told me exactly where the games and history diverged. The games had drawn him in and had inspired him to learn more about the real heroes that were so much larger than life, you'd believe they could fight a whole army and win. And that's when it clicked for me. And I finally understood how this strange genre I had dismissed at a glance had become so widespread. That's what I really meant when I said I wanted to talk about the history of Musou games. And that's why I think you should give one a try yourself. Thanks for watching. I'm Julian. You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch at Hug It Out.